The Honourable Catherine McKenna is Canada's former Minister of Environment and Climate Change and Minister of Infrastructure. She is CEO of Climate and Nature Solutions, chairs the UN Secretary General's Expert Group on Net Zero Commitments, and founded Women Leading on Climate. A driving force behind Canada's first National Climate Plan and carbon pricing law, Catherine has united governments, businesses, and citizens in the fight for a livable world. Her new book, Run Like a Girl, is a candid, scrapbook-style memoir about politics, parenting, and perseverance in an inspiring call for women everywhere to lead with courage, resilience, and authenticity. And let's welcome Catherine McKenna.
All right, it's awesome to be here. I want to start by recognizing we're on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples at the confluence of three major bodies of water where the Indigenous peoples have lived for millennia. And I think there's obviously a lot more we need to be doing on the journey to reconciliation. Okay, so I am a little bit late in starting, but thank you for everyone who bought a book. That's always great. You know, I'm quite happy about that. So I'm going to talk a bit about some moments in the book, but just so you know, the book, if you have it, is a very non-traditional book. A lot of people thought it's like this political memoir. It's actually really my theories about how to make change. And I'm very Gen X, so it's not prescriptive. It's like, I don't know, what did I learn? Because when I started as a kid, I didn't know anything about how to make change. I knew there were a lot of problems, but I didn't know, like you do now. They got to go lobby the government because everyone else, fossil fuel companies, are doing all the lobbying. So you got to get out there too. But things like that you don't know when you're young. And this is a little bit about my journey about making change. So I don't have a clicker, so I'm going to rely on someone to. There we go. So you need to know three things from about me. One, I'm from the Hammer, Hamilton. Anyone from the Hammer here? Hey, everyone wants to be from the Hammer. I know that. That's actually, go back. That's actually a hammer that was made for me by my kids when I became Minister of Infrastructure. They thought that was kind of cool. But why is the hammer important? The fact I'm from Hamilton, because I try to be just a regular person. You cannot be fancy in Hamilton. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, is talking to regular people about things that matter to them. And that's what I've tried to do in politics. And that's what I try to do now, because that's the only way we're going to be able to resonate with folks. So often I'd be at the cabinet table and I'd say, yeah, I don't know, like whatever you're talking about, people in the Hammer have no idea. They don't care. It's quite good. Secondly, next slide. I'm Irish. That's my grandfather. He fought for Irish independence. You probably understand. That is why I am tough, because fighting for Irish independence didn't happen in a day, I will tell you. It happened over centuries. And it's the same thing with climate change. If people gave up in Ireland, they would not be independent. So we cannot give up. We can never give up. And I would think about that when I would have hard days. I'd say, what would my grandfather's advice? He'd be like, just keep on bloody well going. So next one. I'm also a swimmer. Now, this is kind of a device I use when I talk to companies. So I talk to companies about climate change. They're like, oh, but working on climate change, it's really hard. So someone said it to me. I also tell everyone hard things are hard. Like, I'm sorry, climate change, it's just hard. So you're going to have to do some work. But when they say this, like 1.5 degrees, like, is it okay? Does anyone remember this summer and the Olympian, most decorated Olympian from Canada this summer? Her name was Summer McIntosh. You are all the best for knowing that. So I was probably around 5 years old when she said to her family and friends, I'm going to go to the Olympics and I'm going to get a medal. That's called a stretch goal, as I tell our friends in the business community who tell me that 1.5 is hard. I said, imagine she said, I'm just going to go as fast as I go now and win a medal at the Olympics. That's not how it works. So she had a stretch goal. And then like what I learned in swimming, you work really hard. You do the work. Every day you get up and you get in the pool and you go up and down in the pool. And then some days you get on the blocks and then you race and you're never going to be as fast as you probably want to be. So then you go back in the pool and you do more work. And that is the way you improve and get to where we need to be, including on climate. And by the way, I never wanted to be a politician. Everyone asked me this. I just wanted to go to the Olympics. Spoiler alert, I went to Olympic trials. I didn't go to the Olympics, but guess what? I went way faster than I ever thought I could. Next one. Okay, so that's me. People always ask me, like, why do you call the book Run Like a Girl? There's many metaphors. The book also has a lot of swimming. So my swim coach was like, why didn't you call it Swim Like a Girl? And I said, well, that's a worse title. So, um, but that's me in the back row with blonde hair, wearing really kind of crappy t-shirt and shorts. And like we were in Hamilton, we played soccer and girls and boys played together. However you identified, we were just out there. And I remember like I was pretty hardcore. I wanted to win always. And I remember one boy who I think didn't really like me. He told me I ran like a girl. And I was like, oh my gosh, I run like a girl. That is the most annoying thing because it means I'm not as good as the boys. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do everything like boys because I want to win and I want to be the best. And it's kind of funny that that was a little bit of a lesson that I learned because there is Mia Hamm. Anyone heard of her? She's the soccer player. I think she was captain of the US national team. They won a gold medal. And she said, and I should have done this, but I did not have as much confidence. When her coach said she ran like a girl, she said to him, well, you can too if you can keep up. So that's what I tell my younger self, 10-year-old self. Okay, next one. So this is obviously not a happy picture. So when I was growing up, many of you might remember the Ethiopian famine. Does anyone remember that? Like, I just could not believe it. I was young and I, was probably made aware of it by Live Aid. There was like that huge movement of musicians to sell a record to raise money for famine victims. But what I could not understand is that we had so much food and money in the world, but people and kids were starving. And I didn't know how to make change, right? Like I could tell my parents to buy a record, but that was it. And I just think that was when I first thought, okay, I got to figure this out because I want to make change on these things that I think are not okay. But I didn't know how to do it. So next picture. We have no next pictures. No. I went to university and you might be like, well, why is it about swimming? Remember I told you this book is like Swim Like a Girl. I went to U of T swim team, which I went to the U of T swim team. I was part of the U of T swim team, but I went to university and it's kind of funny because for the young people, and I see a couple of young people in the room, like everyone thinks you should have your life figured out at like age 13. I had no idea what I was doing. U of T was good school, but I just wanted to be a swimmer. So, maybe don't tell your parents this, but go to university for the reasons you want to go to university. And so we were a great swim team. And it was lots of fun. And I was studying international relations, but it was also a really good school. And a lot of it was focused on like, what was Canada's role in the world and what more could we do? Next slide. I still didn't know how to make change though. Does anyone here remember the first Earth Summit? That was really the first time I was like, what the heck are we doing with our planet? Like, really, I was like, I don't really get this. Why are we polluting our planet? Why do we not care about our oceans, about our air, about our animals? And I remember Severin Suzuki. So does anyone remember? So she's still around, actually. I was on All the Beach You Can Eat with her a number of years ago with our kids playing. She got up and she spoke to all the leaders and she said to the leaders, like, what the heck is your problem? Like, this is about our future. You guys are leaders, lead and tackle this massive problem. And it really inspired me. But once again, I was like, how do you make change? Like, I don't know how to do this. So next slide. So I went to law school, like anyone who doesn't know how to make change. Anyone here? I'm a recovering lawyer. Recovering politician, still a mother. I don't know. I have like many recovery things, but so that picture, no, go back, sorry. Because I just want people, they might think I'm bonkers, which she might anyway, that's fine. You might be like, why would I put that picture there? Because I went to law school and I was like, okay, this is very weird. All we do is get all these legal texts and we learn all these theories. And I was like, okay, this is really not very helpful for making change. It's like stuff. It's like things on a page. It's about theories of international law. And I still did not get it. So then, next slide. So my partner at the time was a diplomat, and we chose to go to Indonesia. It was right after Suharto had fallen. I don't know if anyone knows, President Suharto, absolutely terrible dictator for 25 years. Anyway, these young people were fighting for democracy. And I was still at law school. I had come over and I ended up being on the streets when they were demonstrating. And just a randomly terrible thing happened. The police and military started shooting. I assumed tear gas. No, live bullets. 13 people died, many students that were 16 and 17. They died fighting for democracy. And that is when I first really understood what fighting for rights, for freedom, for things that you care about is really about. It is putting yourself out there. And in this case, they paid the highest price. They paid the price with their lives. But then I thought, okay, this is what I want to do with my law degree. I want to do work on human rights, and I want to figure out how I can make change. So I became a lawyer. I think that maybe I got this a little bit out of order, but I did become a lawyer. I worked in Indonesia as a lawyer, and I was doing some work there related to human rights, but not a lot. Ironically, I was working on oil and gas law, which came in handy. This is many, many decades ago. But I was like, oh, okay, this whole oil and gas law thing, I'm going to file that away. Anyway, this is now these are the East Timorese. They voted for independence when I was there. So that's when I said, oh, okay, I think I want, and my partner at the time, we said, let's go to East Timor and get a job working for the UN peacekeeping mission there and try to make a difference, try to support the East Timorese who voted for independence. They waited 8-10 hours in the heat. The Indonesian president thought for sure they'd love to stay with Indonesia. Guess what? Over 80% of them voted to separate despite massive threats, which turned into destruction afterwards by Indonesian fueled militia. So then next slide. Okay, that's supposed to be before the other slide. That's me in Jakarta as a lawyer. Okay, you can go on. Look like a lawyer there. That is me when I got the job that I actually kind of probably really always wanted, which was a job working for the United Nations. Like now I felt like, okay, I can go make a difference. And what's an aside, because I am looking at the time, but I was working on renegotiating a treaty governing offshore petroleum rights, what Indonesia had illegally signed with Australia while Indonesia was occupying East Timor. And East Timor is one of it's like the fourth poorest country in the world. And so anyway, I was there, we were negotiating. Actually, Australians were they were taping us. They bugged the negotiations so they would know what we would say with like this East Timorese we had like this ragtag team, and they had the oil and gas companies, obviously loads and gazillion dollars. And they had the whole Australian government on their side. But we fought and we negotiated a new deal. There was still work to be done. But on East Timor's independence on May 20th, they actually had a deal governing their own offshore petroleum rights. Next slide. I came home and then I was like, okay, I really do want to make change. So with a friend, I co-founded an organization called Canadian Lawyers Abroad. And this is the whole point of this is to say, like, I wasn't an expert in climate. I wasn't. Like, I cared about it. And obviously there's intersections. But at this point, it was really focused on human rights. And obviously that's extremely linked with climate change. But I started this organization to help support governments and organizations in developing countries that needed assistance because it was so unfair that East Timor had no support. So here I am. It's with a judge in Ghana. We were helping support the work they were doing there. And then Antonio Lemaire, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, who wrote the Delgamuukw decision, he said to me, why are you guys only working with people in developing countries? Why do you not care about Indigenous peoples? And it wasn't that I didn't care. I'm just ashamed. I knew nothing about, didn't even know anyone that was Indigenous. And I took that to heart, so did my colleague, and we went and we met with Indigenous lawyers, Indigenous law students. We hired actually Indigenous law students to help create a program called Dare to Dream. And this is with the First Nations School of Toronto. It was about dreaming to maybe be a lawyer or do something in the justice system, or not just think the justice system was against you. But it really helped me understand how much work we needed to do in reconciliation. Because if I was a lawyer who'd worked in developing countries and knew very little about Indigenous people and their rights, then we had a lot of work to do. And then I had a new theories of change. Next slide. Well, actually, that's just also for the young people. Life is a journey. Don't think it's going to be ever a straight line. My life has been the most crooked, like all over the place line, and it's been way better for it. Sometimes very hard, but great. Next slide. I decided that we need to get a change in government. It was Stephen Harper who really motivated me to get into politics, because I was like, what is going on here? We're not doing anything we're going backwards on human rights, on climate, on indigenous issues. So I decided to run. I ran for 2 years. Yesterday was the 10th anniversary, and it was the most amazing campaign. I ran 2 years earlier. We created a team from nothing. We had a great MP, Paul Dewar, but we needed a change in government. And so we knocked on more than 100,000 doors, and we increased the voter turnout by 10%. I was very proud, and we won. So now I'm in politics. Keep on going. So then I get asked by the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, to be the Minister for Environment and Climate Change. And he says, you're going to the COP in 2 days. And I was like, oh, okay, that's great. What's a COP? Yeah, Conference of the Parties, which is really the worst acronym. So then I banned acronyms, but here I am. And it was amazing because at that time, it's so different from today, but it was Team Canada. You can look there, you can find someone from every political party. You can see we have premiers, we have Indigenous leader. We, of course, have Elizabeth May. We were on the swim team together. She would lobby me in the Chateau Laurier pool at 7 a.m. So I would go underwater sometimes, just like, Liz. But it was great. Like, we were actually working on climate and serious. Next slide. And here we are. This is when we signed the Paris Agreement, and it was amazing. Next slide. I'll try to blow through because I know we're getting late here. But then it was hard. Then I was like, oh, someone, they think I'm Climate Barbie. And, you might think that Barbie's amazing, as my kids say. Barbie went to the moon. But I knew when I was called by conservatives in particular, I'm sorry, now I sound partisan. I'm just actually telling the truth. Not progressive conservatives, mind you, that I was being called Climate Barbie. And I knew what that meant. It meant that I was a bimbo, that I was only there because I was a woman in cabinet in this role, and that climate was a joke. I was like, wow, that was really amazing. Misogyny and climate denial all in one little package. That's really smart. So I decided, I did nothing for a long time because I was like, okay, I don't want to be like a victim, or I don't want to attract more attention. My tombstone will probably have Climate Barbie, but that's okay because the new movie, Greta Gerwig's movie, is awesome. But I just called it out. I decided to call it out when Jerry Ritz, who was a colleague in the House of Commons, a former minister, called me Climate Barbie when I was at climate negotiations in New York. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I think I'm just going to have to do something, team. And my team, I was like, sorry. And then I said, and I'm a lawyer, so I'm like, still like, I was muted, but do you use that sexist language about your daughter, mother, sister? We need more women in politics. Your sexist comments won't stop us. And I was just saying it to him. But it exploded. This got out there. And what was amazing is most Canadians said, that's not okay. Like, it didn't matter. You'd be conservative, whoever, people stopping the streets and say, that was not okay. Like, I get my kids to look at this because this is how you call it a bully. And I was like, oh, yes, that is good. We should do this a little bit to call things out because it's not okay. And we have to actually behave better as politicians. Keep on going. You guys will probably remember the Barbie. Yes, I got many Barbies. Grown men went to stores. They found Barbies. They found my office address. They mailed them to my office with a mean note. I don't know. That's like a lot of time spent and invested. But we would give them to the Christmas drives, except I found one, so I decided to put it in my book. But there were also amazing things, right? Like, we got a climate plan, and we also protected massive amounts of nature with Indigenous people. So here I am with Musa. Musa is an Inuk. He's brought back the culture of building kayaks, with which Inuit had lost. And it was amazing. We protected Talirup-Tupamanga, which was at the time the largest protected area in the ocean in our high Arctic. Next. Oh, my friends, the resistance. I thought we'd beaten them, but anyway. Yep. They all kind of look the same, don't you think? I mean, there might be different heights, but there are definitely certain similarities. Yeah, well, Ken's a lot more handsome. Sorry, I mean, not that it matters. But anyway, this was a problem because when we had started working on climate, and it's sometimes forgotten when people tell like the story of of the carbon pricing, that when I was minister, 80% of Canadians lived in a jurisdiction with a price on pollution. But then many of them stopped it. And that made it really hard. Like it didn't drop from the sky. I was like, oh, I'm going to make everyone's lives very difficult. I think I'll do a price on pollution. No, 80% of jurisdictions, they had either a cap and trade or they had a carbon tax. And I want to thank everyone in this room because I know you all supported me. You wrote letters, you demonstrated, you did all these things, and it matters. It matters to be out in the streets. It matters to support politicians working hard. It even matters to call out when we built a pipeline, because I was like, yeah, we better do more. We better do more because people are disappointed. Many people are disappointed. That matters. It really matters. Sometimes you can feel like it doesn't matter. No, politicians see that. They need to feel that people care. Because by the way, right now, down the street, there's probably 20 lobbyists from oil and gas companies meeting with ministers or MPs or senators or staffers or public servants. So thank you for lobbying today. Keep on going. We won at the Supreme Court, although just shows that was amazing. I was like, my job is done. We have now managed to win. But sadly, we ended up losing carbon pricing. So I mean, obviously, there are many lessons on that. Read my chapter, Hard Things Are Hard, or if you're very sick of hearing me rant about carbon pricing, don't read it. But I think it's actually also, there's a lot of blame to go around. And I don't mean that. Obviously, conservative politicians, it was really them. They misled everyone. They spent tax dollars. They had stickers on pumps that did not stick, which was quite awesome. I would tell also people to peel them off and they'd give them to me. But the problem is that we didn't advertise. We didn't call it. I mean, there's just a whole thing. I won't even go into it, but you can read the chapter. It's just hard. And I call the chapter Hard Things Are Hard because they are hard. And you got to fight for things and you have to never stop fighting, apparently.
It's 2:40. It seems
I have two
there
left.
is a possibility of going all the way till 3 if you want to.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to just tell me to end. I'm almost at the end. I'm pretty good on time. So this is just me doing a pinky promise because I did pinky promises with kids. So when I left politics, I don't owe anything to Canadians, i.e. I did my job, I've left, but those promises continue. And those were promises that we would both, all of us, there were hundreds of kids, continue working on climate change. And I take that very seriously. I think about those kids, and one of those kids is here. Where's Sophia? Sophia is here. So many of you, some of you may know this story. There's a picture of Sophia in the book. We did a pinky promise when Sophia was around 10, and we went to an Inconvenience sequel. And she said to me, I'm really concerned about climate change and I'm trying to act on climate change. And then later on, I went to Sudbury and I met with Sophia and she'd started climate strikes, the first climate strikes in North America. And then a little later, I see that there's litigation against Doug Ford and it's called Mather versus Ontario government. I was like, is that Sophia? So let me tell you, the kids are still acting on climate. The kids are out there. So that's what we need. We need the kids to continue fighting. Let's just see. Next one. That's me on my bike. One day I got on my bike and I said, I'm leaving politics. And many people were very sad and many people thought I was chased out. And the reality is I decided to leave because I'd done what I'd come to do. I had promised myself that I wasn't just there, to be someone, but to do something. And I felt like I was done. And that's a really personal thing. And it was hard because I actually left before my pension even vested, but I was like, I will figure it out. I did not get into politics like my grandfather didn't get into he didn't fight for Ireland's independence for pension. I decided I would be getting grouchy and I wasn't focused on what I really wanted to do. I want to spend time with my kids. I have 3 kids, although I got remarried, so now I have a 4th. I really wanted to spend time with them post-COVID, but I also wanted to work on climate change globally. And it was hard to leave. Well, actually, it was great. I felt amazing, as you see in the smile. I look pretty zen. But it was hard because I think a lot of people were sad. And maybe some of you were sad and people said, I'm really sad you left politics. You know what? It's not about one person. It is about getting so many people involved and new people and new energy and new voices. So we can't be sad. And I committed then that I would always support good people going into politics, in particular women, because I think we need more women. We need broader diversity generally in politics. And next, we are almost at the end, I promise. So that's me in the UN Secretary General. I did not know what I was going to do once I left. I just knew it was done. And I'm kind of entrepreneurial. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start my own business. And I do that. I work with, I was just talking to someone, I work with people I like on things that are important. That is very important to me. Don't work with fossil fuel companies in case anyone's wondering. I work with like indigenous peoples on large scale nature conservations, work with clean tech companies, work with businesses who are really trying to make a difference. But the UN Secretary General, who I admire the most because he speaks for people who don't have voices. Lots of people speak for, the Prime Minister speaks for, the people of Canada. Companies speak for their shareholders, but who speaks for the people? Everyone. He does. And he asked me, whoops, let me just go back. Anyway, he asked me if I would be the chair of his expert group on net zero commitments of financial institutions, corporate cities, and regions, partly to deal with greenwashing. To be very clear, if you're going to say you're net zero by 2050, that is really far out. Great. Then you got to do the work every day. Back to the swimmer, you have to have interim targets. You can't invest in new fossil fuel infrastructure. You cannot lobby against climate action. Your money needs to go to clean, et cetera, et cetera. We just made it very clear with 10 things that needed to happen, what you could do, what you had to do, and what you couldn't do. And that was really important because I think commitments have to mean something. And we're only fooling ourselves if people are saying that they're, committed to climate action or doing the opposite. I also started Women Leading on Climate on the side. So working with women who were like me, sometimes alone at the table, cabinet tables, boardroom tables, negotiating tables, and communities on the streets like Greta. Like sometimes it's really lonely, but you need to know that there are other women in other rooms that are also speaking up, and that sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, she's going to talk about climate again. And you're like, yeah, I'm going to talk about climate again. Sure am. The last thing, and when I kind of am told, oh gosh, are you talking about that climate thing? I'm like, oh, okay, well, the thing is the thing, and the thing is climate change. And that is because climate change is an everything thing. Like, it's really weird how they want to put it into a bucket of like environment. I'm like, oh no, do you want to know what climate change is? Climate change is an economic issue. Climate change is an infrastructure issue. Climate change is a health issue. Climate change is a social justice issue. It's an indigenous issue. It is a nature issue. It is an everything issue. And we need to start treating it like that because that is the only way we will be able to tackle it. And you'll be glad to know I have my final report to the UN Secretary General. It is going to come in 2 weeks. And spoiler alert, the report is going to say, actually, the Paris Agreement was really important. And so was the concept of net zero, which did not exist before the Paris Agreement. That actually, for the first time, the world came together with a clear temperature goal, 1.5 degrees, where every single country agreed to do their part, including supporting developing countries. And that made a difference. We went to over 4.5 degrees to maybe 2.6 degrees if everyone does what they said they're going to do. And yes, I know that is a big expectation for folks. But the reality is now the case for acting on climate is even greater because the costs and risks are so much more than they were 10 years ago. Mark Carney, he wrote Tragedy of the Horizon, and talked about the costs of climate change and the risks to infrastructure, of litigation, to our economy. Those are way worse. We know that. They're interactive effects, but just look at our wildfires across our country. I did the math because I decided to try to figure out how many people have been evacuated in the last 10 years. It's probably around 2% of our population. Like, think about that. Like, that is bonkers. And it's just going to get worse. And that's the impact on human lives. That's not even the economic impact, which is massive. I was at UCLA looking at the wildfires in January and talking to folks about climate change then. Largest insured disaster ever. And think about all the people that weren't insured because we're not insuring anymore in many places. But the flip side, the good news, and I saw Bill McKibben's book, Here Comes the Sun. We have the solutions that we never understood would ever be as cheap, as effective as they are, and scalable as they are now. We have the solutions. In 2015, we talked about the solutions, but the problem is scale and cost are real things. And now we have them. So I guess the question, and maybe it goes back when I was thinking about Jane Goodall, which was obviously very sad. I mean, she led an amazing life, but she was very fearless. And I always remember this line. She said, we may be the most intellectual species, but we're not the most intelligent, because if we were, why would we destroy our only home? So climate, to be honest, acting on it is now the only rational response. And I know it's really hard, and I feel it like you do. Some days I feel extremely discouraged. Think about losing a price on pollution. That was really hard because it was a policy that worked and supported, low income and middle income people by giving more money back. And it drove down our emissions. It's literally like the most perfect policy, but it's hard and you have to fight. And so all I would say to you is just keep on fighting. You are on the right side of history. You are on the right side of the planet, and you are on the right side for our kids. And that is it. And read my book.
Conferences of the parties need to be reformed, and if so, how?
So, yeah, Conference of the Parties, I love it. Thank you for not using an acronym. Although it's kind of a word, like useless series of words too. Conference of the Parties. Like, what is that? So first of all, because I have to wear two hats. So I was just talking to Christiana Figueres, and we talked, like Laurence Tubiana, some of the women that were there at the beginning, the negotiation of the Paris Agreement. Christiana Figueres was the executive secretary of the UNFCCC, and Laurence Tubiana was she was the climate ambassador for France, and they were good friends. They were actually great mentors to me because I really didn't know a lot when I started. The challenge is, like, we can't put the weight of the world on the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is only as good as the countries who actually agreed to it live up to their own obligations. We have finished negotiating the Paris Agreement. So it is a bit artificial. Like, we all have to go to COP and do all these things. It is now the work has to be at home. So like Women Leading on Climate, we have chapters in country because we need to push things in country. So I do think I'm getting a little tired, to be honest. And I know this sounds maybe heretical to some of you, of going to COPs. I'm getting tired of them because I'm not exactly sure what we're all doing there. I know we all want to tackle climate change. Are we really tackling climate change? Or are we just actually increasing emissions? I think the negotiations of some things are important, but once again, we needed a framework agreement. We got that. That's called the Paris Agreement. We had a few more COPs that had to finish certain things, but now people have to step up. They need to step up with money. They need to step up with their actual commitments. They need to live up to their commitments. They need to implement them, and that doesn't happen at a COP. Now, this COP is important because countries are supposed to ratchet up their commitments, but unfortunately not very many have. So, look, I think we need to do a lot of things, but the most important thing is we actually need to reduce our emissions and we need to scale solutions, and we need to support developing, especially the least developed countries right now. And there is a role for COP. It's much less than actually the real action that we need to see in a whole variety of different fora.
Oh, well, thank you for that. So, okay, we have a lot of really good questions. You all are making me make hard decisions.
Here we go. I'm looking at this time like, am I going to pass this?
Well, if you can give a straightforward answer to this question, you can probably just solve all of our problems. So,
okay.
My
kids think I can do nothing really that well, so we'll try. Here.
Okay. Well, how can the colonial climate advocates collaborate with Indigenous communities to convince government that social and economic equity is out of balance and needs immediate attention?
I think just work with Indigenous communities. That's what I did, but you got to get outside your comfort zone. And you also have to be careful and not assume actually everyone's a monolith, because there are some communities that do want to develop, fossil fuels. And I think they then find it very distinctly irritating that people are like, well, actually, we know that, Indigenous peoples don't. So I just would say we have to be just generally respectful and not speak for people, but we need to work with people. And I saw that. And most of the Indigenous communities I work with, they said they want reconciliation. There's one action. They want things. Like they want actually their communities to have, clean drinking water. And they want to have jobs in the sustainable economy. They don't drop from the sky. You actually have to create those, sectors. And when I was working with PJ Akioguk, so he's currently the premier of Nunavut. He's leaving. There'll be a new premier. he said to me, "Oh, that's really great that you want to protect 30% of nature and that you think we should do that." And they're like, "We protect our nature. Thank you." He's like, "I actually would like a deep water port. I would like $200,000. 200 million. If it was 200,000, that'd be a lot easier. It was 200 million. I was like, whoa, that is a lot of money. But that's not a surprise, right? Like they aren't just protecting the nature for the sake of it. They live there. And so they need opportunities and jobs. But I think just working with them and being allies, and pushing governments to do a lot better, and to meet the right, the duty to consult and accommodate. That's a real thing. That's not something you can get around. And in fact, you'll lose the Supreme Court anyway if you do try to. But I do think that there's still a lot of work to be done in that regard. And I think some people I see where they're like, Donald Trump, that means we just push anything through. That is not how Indigenous people see it at all in their own communities.
No, that's wonderful. I think what strikes me as very hard about this is the convince government part, which of course is what we come here every day to try to do. But well, as you've said, hard things are hard.
Just keep on
and
lobbying.
so-
No, as I say, I actually did mean to say this. Like, I actually think every time an oil and gas executive or a premier who is somewhat funded or beholden to oil and gas meets, then we should have a young person who cares about climate change meet. And then people can decide what is our future. No one's taken it up yet, but it is. Otherwise, we should control lobbying. Like meeting with, actually, to be honest, government meets with a lot of oil and gas companies. That's not called lobbying. They meet with them to get information about policies. Lobbying is when you come in literally with your own interests. And in the case of oil and gas companies, it's continuing fossil fuels forever and paying nothing for the pollution they cause. Like I can go tell people what they want before they get lobbied because that's what they want. And I think it is a real problem. So just keep on lobbying. We need government to hear your voices. As I said, like being in the streets also helps. Everyone saw the No More Kings or No Kings, not No More, No Kings. It was, that actually solidarity is really important and people need to see that there are people who really care. And I think sometimes now post-COVID, without people on the streets marching, including for climate, governments think, well, people don't really care about climate change, which I know is not true. It is not true. It doesn't mean it's the number one issue. If you have Donald Trump who's trying to invade you or something, who knows, then you're like, okay, we're going to vote on that issue. But climate is still a very significant issue for people, and it's becoming much closer, as we see with wildfires, droughts, extreme heat, etc. Ticks. I was in Montreal yesterday and went and climbed the mountain. There are ticks everywhere, like climate related. I think that we're not connecting the dots, unfortunately, about the real dangers that we're creating for ourselves and our communities.
Well, you said keep on lobbying, so that's always what we like to hear. I see that there's a question that follows pretty nicely from that. So we were wondering if you could say some more about the role of CCL Canada or about NGOs and climate groups in general, about the role of CCL Canada and other similar groups in bringing about Canada's carbon tax.
Yeah, you guys were critical, because it couldn't just be me and it couldn't just be environmentalists. It had to be a broad society approach. And part of the challenge is it is a complicated policy and it's something that's easy to slam. Now, in the end, I actually think that, the first election, I was desperately worried. You can read in the book. I was so worried we were going to lose carbon pricing and that it would be my fault. So I was like spending all my time like at H&R Block because they had good signs with a climate action incentive, like doing videos with regular people, finding out that they got more money back and they were excited and making, trying to get MPs to do that. But it was also folks like you. You were writing in letters. You were, marching on the streets. We had the massive climate march, remember, in September of 2019. Greta was here. And it's interesting because in government, some people are like, are you going to march? Like, maybe we shouldn't march because we built a pipeline. And I was like, oh, that is really the wrong lesson. So the right lesson is we're going to march and we're going to do even more because we bought a pipeline. And the pipeline was really hard. You'll see a chapter in my book called Collision. And I was trying to figure out what to call that, but it was literally when we declared a climate emergency and then we bought a pipeline the next day. Imagine being the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, me. It was really, really hard. Now, there's a long history to that, and I think we can't like sugarcoat it. We were trying to support the Notley government when the pipeline first came up. We also did tanker ban and Northern Gateway didn't go ahead and Keystone. So, hard things are hard. It's just, it did mean that we needed to demonstrate to Canadians that we were still committed to climate and we were trying to figure it out. And so I was like, okay, you guys cannot march. If you're not going to march, I'm going to be right out there. Thank you very much. And I went out there and yeah, I take my lumps, but in a way, it really helps me when you're a minister and you hear other people demanding more from your government. It actually helps if you're the person who's demanding more internally. Well, not demanding because you don't get it. You're just one person, you're one minister. But if you're being supported on the outside. So I think it really matters. I think lobbying super matters. I think being on the street really matters. I've met many of you who are a part of church groups. I talk a lot about my uncle is a Jesuit because he's the Irish family and he was the eldest. And he learned a lot from him, but also I did have a chance to meet the Pope. Pope Francis, and he gave me a copy of Laudato Si. And I just realized, like, if we could get all Catholics to see climate as a social justice issue, think about the impact. And I think this is how I don't care why people care about climate change. I really don't. You care about it as an economic issue, or you care about it as a health issue. You care about it as a social justice issue, or a clean infrastructure and jobs issue. I don't really care. But we need to get people to care. We need to get more people to care and step up for it and understand climate for the big challenge it is, but also the big opportunity, yes, to build a cleaner future, but also to tackle inequality. So I think if we can do that through religious groups, but I think, that I also met someone who's with a grandmother's association. Like, I think we need groups that are broader than just environment groups. And that is, sometimes hard. People are busy and it can't all be online. It's a reality because there's so much garbage online already and disinformation. That's why actually the No Kings thing was so important. Like I said that to my Democratic friends, it's so important. One, people feel solidarity. They don't feel as sad alone thinking they're fighting this and, looking at everything online, but also it shows that there are so many people who care about something different. So I don't know. I do think marching is important too. So just, whatever you can do in your community to get beyond and to engage unusual suspects. Because I really thought about it hard when we were going to the Supreme Court because I was like, who do I want standing on the steps of the court? Like I'm very visual. So you'll see my book. I'm very visual. So I was like, okay, who do I want standing on the steps of the courthouse? I wanted Indigenous peoples. I wanted economists. I wanted young people. I wanted religious groups. I wanted labor groups. I wanted mayors. Like I just wanted something that I wanted doctors and health professionals. I just wanted a group that looked much more like Canada than the other dudes did. And I'm not saying that they look like a particular segment, but we needed to go beyond that. And we needed to show that lots of people care, no matter what they look like, they wanted climate action.
Well, that's a pretty inspiring call to action. I think that's the time we have now, but let's give Catherine McKenna another round of applause.
Okay.